Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
They put her in a machine that measures how far a person will bend before they break. The machine registered 0. The Xylanthic coach thought it was broken. It wasn't. Her name was Elena Vasquez, and she was the worst athlete the Xylanthic Sporting Commission had ever seen. This was not hyperbole. This was data. The Xylanthic did not deal in hyperbole. They dealt in metrics, probabilities, and the cold, precise language of optimization. Elena had been run through 17 different assessment protocols in the 3 days since her arrival on Xylo's station, and she had failed every single one with a consistency that bordered on artistic. Her vertical leap was measured at 0.3 Xylanthic units, which the translation implant helpfully converted to approximately 11 inches. Her sprint speed placed her in the bottom percentile of unmodified juvenile Xylanthic, and the juveniles in question were 3 years old. Her reaction time, when charted against the galactic average, did not appear on the graph at all. The computer had simply refused to render the data point, assuming sensor error. There had been no sensor error. Coach Threx VA watched the readouts cycle across his primary visual field, his secondary eyelids blinking in a pattern that indicated what humans might call confusion, and what Xylanthic called unexpected data requiring recalibration. He had coached athletes from 17 different species across 6 galactic sectors. He had trained a Vortian grab jumper who could pull 30 standard GS without losing consciousness. He had coached a Hive Queens champion through 3 consecutive Grand Circuit championships. He had never seen anything like Elena Vasquez. Run the flexibility assessment again, he said, his translator unit rendering his subsonic vocalizations into something approximating English. The human woman, standing in the center of the assessment chamber, tilted her head. She was not tall by human standards, perhaps 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in practical knot, and the kind of face that could disappear in a crowd or hold your attention for reasons you couldn't quite name. She wore the standard assessment skin suit, which clung to her like a second layer of dark gray skin, and she looked, Threx VA thought, remarkably unconcerned for someone whose every measurable attribute had just been declared suboptimal. "I can touch my toes," she said. "That's about it. That is not what I asked." "I know," she shrugged, "but I figured I'd save us both some time. The machine says I'm terrible. I could have told you that. My high school gym teacher told me that. My mother told me that. The recruiting officer who signed me up for this disaster definitely told me that, right before he laughed in my face and wished me luck." Threx VA's primary eyelids contracted. He had not been aware that human recruiting officers could laugh. The gesture had not appeared in any of the briefings. "Recalibrating," he said, more to himself than to her. The Xylanthic Sporting Commission had sent Threx VA to Earth for one reason. The Interstellar Unity Games were approaching, and the games required representation from every member species. Earth had been granted membership 14 standard cycles ago, and in that time, no human had ever competed in the games. Not because humans were banned, not because the rules excluded them, but because no human had ever qualified. The qualification metrics were not secret. They were published across all member communication networks, translated into every known language, distributed through every diplomatic channel. The Xylanthic had done everything short of begging humanity to send anyone to try out. The games were about unity, after all, about bringing the galaxy together in peaceful competition, about celebrating the diversity of sentient life, and about ratings. The broadcast revenue alone was astronomical. But humans, it seemed, were not interested in being celebrated. Threx VA had reviewed the files. 3,427 humans had attempted the preliminary qualification trials over the past 12 standard cycles. Not one had advanced past the first round. The physical disparity was simply too great. Human musculature, while adequate for their native gravity, was laughable by galactic standards. Their bone density was a joke. Their cardiovascular systems, which humans seemed bizarrely proud of, were merely average when measured against species that had evolved on high-gravity worlds or in oxygen-poor atmospheres. And yet the Commission had insisted. Find one, the directive had said. We don't care if they win. We just need a body. Someone to stand in the athlete circle during the opening ceremonies. Someone to wave at the cameras. Someone to lose with dignity. So HFY had gone to Earth. He had sat through 17 days of tryouts in a poorly ventilated facility outside a city called Cleveland. He had watched humans run, jump, throw, lift, and collapse. He had watched them cry, fight, hug each other, and curse at referees. He had watched them try, fail, and try again. And then he had watched Elena Vasquez. She had not been the fastest. She had not been the strongest. She had not been the most skilled, the most coordinated, the most anything that could be measured by a machine. But she had been the last one standing. Literally. After 3 days of continuous trials, when every other human had collapsed from exhaustion or been carried off by medical staff, Elena Vasquez had still been standing in the center of the facility, breathing hard, sweating through her uniform, looking for all the world like she was waiting for a bus. I'm not done, she had said when HFY approached her. You are the only one left, he had replied. Then I guess I win. HFY had not understood the joke. He still did not understand it. But something in the way she had said it, the flatness of her voice, the lack of triumph, the simple acknowledgement of a fact that should have been disappointing, had made him offer her a contract. She had read it, signed it, and asked if there was food on Xylo's station. The food was terrible. Elena sat in her quarters, a small, efficient room that reminded her of a hospital if hospitals were designed by people who had never seen a human and didn't care to, and poked at a tray of nutrition paste with something that might have been a spoon. The paste was gray. It tasted like nothing. It had the texture of wet cardboard and the nutritional density of something that had been engineered to keep a body alive without giving it any pleasure whatsoever. This is awful, she said to no one. The room did not respond. The room had never responded. The room was a box of pale, white material that absorbed sound and reflected light in a way that made her eyes ache. There was a bed that was too hard, a chair that was too low, and a window that looked out at the interior of a space station that orbited a star she could not name. She had been here for 3 days. 3 days of tests, assessments, measurements, and evaluations. 3 days of being told, in the politest possible way, that she was inadequate, that her body was wrong, that her species was wrong, that everything she was and everything she could do fell so far below the galactic average that the only reason she was here at all was because someone needed a warm body to fill a slot. She should have been offended. She was in fact offended. But the offense was a small thing, a distant thing, like a headache you could feel coming on but hadn't quite arrived yet. Mostly, she was bored and lonely and hungry for something that wasn't gray paste. She put down the spoon and stood up. The room's gravity was set to Xylanthic standard, which was approximately 1.2 times Earth normal. Not enough to be crushing, but enough to notice. Enough to make her joints ache after a long day. Enough to make her feel, constantly, like she was carrying something she couldn't put down. She walked to the window and pressed her forehead against the cool surface. Outside, the station's interior was a maze of corridors, docking ports, and observation domes, all of it lit by the soft blue glow of artificial lighting. Xylanthic preferred blue light. It reminded them of their homeworld's primary sun. It made Elena's head hurt. Somewhere out there, HFY was reviewing her assessment data. Somewhere out there, the Commission was deciding whether to keep her or send her home. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was going about its business, indifferent to the small, inadequate human in the small, inadequate room. She thought about her mother, who had told her she was wasting her time. She thought about her high school gym teacher, who had told her she had the athletic ability of a houseplant. She thought about the recruiting officer, who had laughed in her face and wished her luck, as if luck was the only thing that could possibly save her. She thought about all the people who had told her she couldn't. And then she stopped thinking about them, because thinking about them was a waste of time, and time was the only thing she had left. HFY found her in the training bay at 0300 station time. She was not supposed to be there. The training bay was restricted to active athletes during designated hours, and Elena Vasquez was not an active athlete. She was a candidate, a provisional, a warm body. She had no business touching the equipment, accessing the facilities, or being anywhere other than her quarters after 2200. And yet there she was. She was on the floor, not collapsed positioned. Her body was arranged in a shape that HFY did not recognize. Her legs folded beneath her, her hands pressed together at her chest, her eyes closed. She was breathing slowly, deliberately. Her face was slack, expressionless, as if she had removed herself entirely from her own body and left only the machinery behind. "What are you doing?" HFY asked. Her eyes opened. She did not startle. She did not jump. She simply opened her eyes and looked at him, and in that look, HFY saw something he had not seen before. Not defiance, not fear, not exhaustion. Something else. Something he could not name. "Meditating," she said. Definition unclear. "I'm thinking about nothing." She unfolded her legs and stood up in a single motion, her joints popping audibly in the quiet of the training bay. Or trying to anyway. It's harder than it looks. Your assessment data indicates that you are physically incapable of meeting minimum competition standards across all 17 measured categories. I know. Your reaction time is 47% slower than the galactic average. I know. Your strength-to-mass ratio places you in the bottom 0.3% of all tested species. I know. Tragzba pauja. He had expected denial. He had expected argument. He had expected the kind of desperate, self-deceiving optimism that he had seen in countless failed athletes across countless species. What he had not expected was acceptance. Flat, simple, unadorned acceptance of the facts. "You do not seem concerned," he said. "I'm not." "Why?" She walked past him to the nearest piece of training equipment. A resistance arch designed for xylanthic musculature, calibrated to several hundred standard units of force. She placed her hand on it, did not attempt to lift it, just touched it, as if confirming it was real. "Because I didn't come here to win," she said. "Then why did you come?" She turned to face him. In the blue light of the training bay, her dark eyes seemed to absorb the glow rather than reflect it. Her face was calm. Her voice was calm. Everything about her was calm, and that calmness HFY realized was the strangest thing of all. "Because someone had to," she said. The Interstellar Unity Games were held on a neutral world called Paxis 7, a tidally locked planet with a permanent day side and a permanent night side. The games took place in the twilight band between the two, where the temperature was moderate, the gravity was standard, and the light was a perpetual golden dusk that made everything look like a painting. Elena arrived 3 weeks before her first event. She spent those 3 weeks doing things that made no sense to the xylanthic coaching staff. She did not spend hours in the weight room, trying to build muscle she would never have. She did not run drills until her lungs burned, trying to close a gap that could not be closed. She did not study footage of her competitors, memorizing their techniques, and searching for weaknesses that did not exist. Instead, she walked. Every morning, she walked the perimeter of the athlete's village. The village was enormous. A temporary city of prefabricated structures, housing thousands of competitors from hundreds of species. The walk took approximately 2 hours. She did it at a pace that HFY would have described as leisurely if he had been feeling generous, and pointless if he had been feeling honest. After her walk, she sat. She found a spot near the edge of the twilight zone, where the light was softest and the air was cool, and she sat on the ground with her legs folded and her eyes closed. She sat for an hour, sometimes 2, sometimes until the light shifted and the shadows grew long and the temperature dropped enough to make her shiver. In the afternoons, she talked to people. Not athletes. She talked to everyone else. The cooks, the maintenance workers, the medical staff, the volunteers who handed out water and towels and directions to the bathrooms. She learned their names. She learned their stories. She learned which ones were homesick and which ones were excited and which ones were counting the days until they could leave. In the evenings, she wrote. She had a paper notebook, actual paper, a relic from Earth that she had carried across the galaxy, and she wrote in it with a cheap ballpoint pen. She wrote about the light, the air, the sound of the wind, the way the alien sky looked at dusk, full of stars she did not recognize. She did not train. Not once. Not for a single minute. Threx VA watched all of this with mounting confusion. He had access to her biometric data through the station's monitoring systems, and the data told him nothing useful. Her heart rate remained low. Her stress hormones remained stable. Her sleep patterns were regular. She was, by every measurable metric, the calmest athlete he had ever observed. But she was also the worst. I do not understand, he said to her on the morning of her first event. They were standing at the edge of the competition arena, a vast bowl of polished stone and floating holographic displays. The arena was filled with beings from across the galaxy, spectators, officials, media, and athletes waiting for their events. The noise was tremendous, a cacophony of voices, clicks, hums, and vibrations that seemed to press against Elena's chest like a physical force. "What don't you understand?" she asked. "Your approach, your methods, your complete lack of preparation." He gestured toward the arena, where a group of Vortian athletes were warming up with a series of gravity-defying leaps. These are the best competitors in the galaxy. They have trained for this their entire lives. They have optimized every aspect of their physical being. And you, he stopped. You walked. Elena smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed her face in a way that Threx VA found deeply unsettling. "I walked," she agreed. "You are about to compete against beings who can lift 10 times your body weight. I know. Beings who can run faster than your visual system can track. I know. Beings who have reaction times measured in microseconds. I know." Threx VA's secondary eyelids contracted. He had heard this before. The same words, the same tone, the same infuriating calm. He had heard on Earth, in that facility outside Cleveland, when she had told him she wasn't done. He had heard on Xylo's station, in the training bay at 0300, when she had told him she hadn't come to win. And now he was hearing it again, and he still did not understand. "Then, what do you know?" he asked. "What is it that you understand that I do not?" Elena looked at him for a long moment. In the golden light of the twilight zone, her dark eyes seemed to hold something ancient, something patient, something that had been waiting for a very long time. "I know that you can't measure a human by what they can do," she said. "You have to measure them by what they won't stop doing." The event was called the Gauntlet. It was the game's most demanding competition, a combination of speed, strength, endurance, and problem-solving that had been designed specifically to test the limits of biological performance. The course was 2.4 kilometers long, divided into 12 segments, each segment requiring a different physical or cognitive skill. There was climbing, there was lifting, there was running, there was puzzle solving, there was balance, there was memory, there was pain, lots of pain. Elena stood at the starting line and looked at the course. It rose before her like a mountain range made of metal and light, a vertical and horizontal maze of obstacles that seemed designed not to be completed, but to be survived. She could see the first obstacle clearly, a sheer wall, 30 meters high, its surface smooth and featureless. The Vortian athletes would leap it in a single bound. The Xylanthic athletes would climb it with their powerful limbs. The Hive Queen champion would simply walk up it, her species' unique adhesion allowing her to treat vertical surfaces as horizontal. Elena would have to find another way. She had no plan. That was the first thing she had learned about herself, back on Earth, back in that facility outside Cleveland, back when she had been the last one standing and everyone else had collapsed. She had no plan. She had never had a plan. Plans required knowing what was coming, and Elena had never known what was coming. She had only known that she was still standing. The starting signal sounded a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the ground and up through her bones. She started moving. The wall was first. She reached it in 17 seconds, which was slow by galactic standards, but fast by hers. She touched this smooth surface with her palm and felt the coldness of it, the impossibility of it. There were no handholds, no footholds, no cracks or seams or anything that would allow a human body to ascend. She looked to her left. The Vortian athletes were already over the wall, their powerful legs propelling them into the next segment. She looked to her right. The Xylanthic athletes were halfway up, their claws finding purchase on a surface that seemed to offer none. Elena looked down at her hands. Small hands. Soft hands. Hands that had never climbed anything more challenging than a ladder. She looked back up at the wall, and then she started climbing. Not with her hands. Not with her feet. With her body. She pressed her entire front against the wall, using the friction of her skin suit to hold herself in place. She moved sideways, not upward, searching for something, anything that would give her an advantage. A seam, a joint, a place where two panels of the wall met and left a microscopic gap. She found it. A hairline crack, invisible from a distance, running vertically up the left edge of the wall. She wedged her fingers into it, just the tips, just enough to feel something solid beneath the smooth surface, and pulled. Her fingernails broke. Blood welled up from the torn edges of her cuticles. She ignored it. She pulled again. Her body rose. A few centimeters. Then a few more. She moved her feet, finding purchase against the wall's surface through the sheer pressure of her shoes. She moved her hands, finding new gaps, new seams, new places where the impossible wall became merely difficult. She climbed. It took her 12 minutes to reach the top of the wall. 12 minutes of pain, of blood, of muscles screaming in protest. 12 minutes of falling, catching herself, falling again, catching herself again. 12 minutes of refusing to let go. When she pulled herself over the top and dropped to the other side, her hands were torn and bleeding. Her arms were shaking. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She was in last place. By a lot. She kept moving. The second obstacle was a maze of rotating platforms, each one spinning at a different speed and direction. The goal was simple: cross from one side to the other without falling. The challenge was that the platforms were spaced at distances that required precise timing and coordination, the kind of timing and coordination that Elena's reaction time could not provide. She watched the platforms for a full minute. She watched the patterns of their rotation, the gaps between them, the moments when two platforms aligned just long enough for a single step. She watched until she could see the rhythm beneath the chaos, the structure beneath the noise. And then she stepped, not when the gap was widest, not when the timing was easiest. She stepped when the gap was smallest, when the platforms were moving fastest, when the margin for error was measured in fractions of a second. She stepped, and she did not hesitate. Her foot landed exactly where it needed to be. Her body shifted, balanced, adjusted. She stepped again, and again, and again. Her movements were not fast. They were not graceful. They were not anything that a coach would have taught or a computer would have recommended. But they worked. She crossed the maze in 8 minutes. 37 other athletes had already crossed before her. 41 more would cross after. But she crossed. And she kept moving. The third obstacle was a puzzle. Not a physical puzzle, a cognitive one. A holographic display appeared before her, filled with symbols and equations and logical relationships that her translation implant could not render into anything recognizable. She looked at it. She looked at the symbols, the equations, the relationships. She did not understand any of it. But she understood something else. She understood that the puzzle was not designed for humans. It was designed for Xylanthic minds, for Vortian perception, for Hive Queen processing. It was designed for beings who thought in different categories, different frameworks, different ways of organizing information. She could not solve the puzzle as it was presented. So she changed how she looked at it. She stopped trying to understand the symbols. She stopped trying to translate the equations. She stopped trying to find logical relationships where none existed for her. Instead, she looked at the puzzle as a pattern, a shape, a visual arrangement of light and dark, contrast and similarity, symmetry and asymmetry. She looked at the puzzle the way she had looked at the wall, not as an obstacle to be overcome by strength or speed or intelligence, but as a problem to be solved by persistence. She touched the display. She moved one symbol to a different location. The display flashed red. Incorrect. She moved another. Red. Incorrect. She moved a third. Red. She kept moving. She moved symbols for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. The display flashed red 1,000 times, 10,000 times. She did not count. She did not stop. She simply kept moving symbols, kept trying combinations, kept looking for the pattern that would make the red light turn green. And then on the 10,000th and first try it did. The puzzle dissolved. The path forward opened. She stepped through, and she kept moving. The fourth obstacle was endurance. Not the kind of endurance that could be measured in minutes or hours or even days. The kind of endurance that could only be measured in refusal. The obstacle was simple. A straight line, 1 kilometer long, with no barriers, no challenges, no tricks. All she had to do was walk from one end to the other. But the environment was wrong. The temperature was calibrated for xylanthic comfort, cold by human standards, barely above freezing. The air pressure was low, the oxygen content reduced. The gravity was high, 1.5 times Earth normal, pressing down on her with every step. She started walking. Her body rebelled immediately. Her lungs burned. Her joints ached. Her muscles screamed. The cold bit through her skin suit like a living thing, sinking into her bones, making her shiver uncontrollably. She kept walking. She walked for an hour, 2 hours. The end of the line did not get closer. It stayed exactly where it had always been, a distant point on the horizon that seemed to mock her with its permanence. She kept walking. She walked until her vision blurred, until her legs gave out, and she fell to the ground, until she crawled back to her feet and kept walking, until she fell again, and crawled again, and walked again. She walked until she could not remember why she was walking, until the only thing left in her mind was the next step, and the next, and the next. She walked for 17 hours. When she finally reached the end of the line, there was no one there to see it. The other athletes had finished hours ago. The spectators had moved on to other events. The officials had logged her time and moved on to other duties. She was alone. She stood at the end of the line, swaying on her feet, her body trembling with exhaustion and cold and pain. Her hands were still bleeding. Her lungs still burned. Her legs felt like they might never work again. She took a breath. Then another. Then another. And then she kept moving. The fifth obstacle was the last one. It was called the stand. There was no physical challenge. No puzzle to solve. No distance to cover. The stand was simple. A circle 3 meters in diameter, marked on the ground in glowing white light. All Elena had to do was stand inside the circle and not leave, for as long as it took. The rules were explained to her by a holographic official. She could not sit. She could not lie down. She could not lean on anything or anyone. She could only stand inside the circle until the event ended. The event would end when only one athlete remained. Elena looked at the circle. She looked at the other athletes, the Vordians, the Xylanthic, the Hive Queen's champion, the dozens of others who had made it this far. They were all looking at her, some with curiosity, some with pity, some with the cold assessment of competitors measuring a threat. She stepped into the circle. The stand began. The first hour was easy. Elena stood in the circle, her weight evenly distributed, her breathing steady. The other athletes stood in their own circles, arranged around the arena in a wide ring. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sounds were the wind and the distant murmur of the crowd. The second hour was harder. Her legs began to ache. The muscles in her calves and thighs burned with a low, persistent fire. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to find relief. The other athletes did the same. Some of them, she noticed, were already showing signs of fatigue, small tremors in their limbs, subtle shifts in their posture. The third hour was worse. The Vortian athlete to her left collapsed, just fell over, her powerful legs finally giving out after hours of standing. She was carried away by medical drones, her face a mask of exhaustion and disbelief. Elena watched her go and felt a strange sympathy. The Vortian had trained her whole life for this. She had optimized every aspect of her being, and still she had fallen. The fourth hour brought the first Xylanthic collapse. HFY's species mate went down with a grunt of frustration, his secondary eyelids flickering wildly as he was loaded onto a stretcher. He had lasted longer than the Vortian, but not long enough. The fifth hour, the sixth, the seventh. One by one, the athletes fell. They fell from exhaustion, from dehydration, from the simple, brutal reality that standing in one place for hours on end was a torture that no amount of training could fully prepare for. But Elena did not fall. She stood. Her body screamed at her to sit, to lie down, to do anything other than remain upright. Her legs had gone numb hours ago, replaced by a dull, throbbing pain that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than muscle. Her back ached. Her neck ached. Her head ached with a pounding, insistent rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She stood. The 10th hour. The 11th. The 12th. The Hive Queen's champion fell at hour 13. She had been the favorite to win, her species' legendary endurance making her seem almost invincible. But even she had limits. Even she could only stand for so long before her body betrayed her. She fell, and Elena was still standing. The 14th hour. The 15th. There were only 3 athletes left now. Elena, a Vortian female who seemed to be made of iron, and a Xylanthic male whose face had gone gray with exhaustion. The 16th hour. The Vortian fell. The 17th hour. The Xylanthic fell. Elena was alone. She stood in the circle, swaying slightly, her eyes half closed, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The crowd was silent. The officials were silent. Even the wind seemed to have stopped, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. She had won. She had not won because she was strong. She had not won because she was fast. She had not won because she was skilled or talented or gifted or any of the things that the galaxy valued in its athletes. She had won because she had refused to stop standing. HFY found her in the medical bay 3 hours later. She was lying on a bed, her body wrapped in thermal blankets, her hands bandaged and 4 drip feeding fluids and nutrients in her arm. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment, HFY thought she was asleep. Then her eyes opened. "You came," she said. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "I came," HFY said. He stood beside her bed, his large frame casting a shadow over her small one. He did not know what to say. He had never known what to say to her. She had always been a mystery to him, a collection of data points that refused to resolve into a coherent picture. But now, looking at her, at the bandages on her hands, the exhaustion in her eyes, the quiet satisfaction on her face, he thought he might be beginning to understand. "You did not train," he said. "No. You did not prepare. No. You walked. You sat. You talked to people. You wrote in your book. Yes. And then you stood in a circle for 17 hours and refused to fall." Elena smiled. It was the same smile she had given him in the training bay on Xylo Station. The same smile she had given him at the starting line of the gauntlet. Small, barely there, but unmistakable. "That's what humans do," she said. "We refuse." HFY was silent for a long moment. He thought about the assessment data, the numbers, the metrics, the probabilities. He thought about the machine that had measured her extremes and found her lacking. He thought about the commission, the games, the galaxy that had written off humanity as weak and primitive and strange. He thought about all of it, and then he set it aside. "I was wrong," he said. "About what? About what can be measured?" He looked at her bandaged hands, her exhausted face, her small body wrapped in thermal blankets. "The machine did not register your extremes. because it was not designed to measure them. Your capacity for refusal, your willingness to endure, your stubborn, irrational, inexplicable persistence. He paused. These things cannot be measured by machines. Elena's smile widened, just a fraction. Told you, she said. The Xylanthic Sporting Commission released their final report on the Interstellar Unity Games 3 standard cycles later. The report was 5,000 pages long, filled with data, analysis, and recommendations for future competitions. It covered every event, every athlete, every record broken, and every expectation subverted. But the most widely read section was the appendix, which contained a single page of text. The page was titled, "On the Human Athlete." It read, Elena Vasquez of Earth competed in a single event at the Interstellar Unity Games. Her performance metrics placed her in the bottom percentile of all athletes across all measurable categories. Her strength was inadequate. Her speed was inadequate. Her reaction time was inadequate. By every objective measure, she should have failed. She did not fail. She completed the gauntlet in 27.4 hours, the slowest time ever recorded. She finished in last place. And yet she finished. Of the 247 athletes who began the event, 246 withdrew or were removed due to physical exhaustion. Elena Vasquez was the only one who remained. The commission has spent 3 cycles attempting to understand how this was possible. We have reviewed her biometric data. We have analyzed her training regimen. We have interviewed her coaches, her support staff, and her fellow competitors. We have found no explanation that satisfies our existing models. We have therefore concluded that our models are incomplete. Human beings cannot be evaluated by the same metrics as other species. Their physical capabilities are, by galactic standards, unremarkable. But their capacity for endurance, for persistence in the face of overwhelming disadvantage, appears to be without precedent. We do not understand this capacity. We cannot measure it. We cannot predict it. But we have learned to respect it. Elena Vasquez prevailed not because she was stronger or faster or more skilled than her competitors. She prevailed because she refused to stop. She stood in a circle for 17 hours while everyone around her fell. She climbed a wall with broken fingernails. She saw the puzzle with 10,000 wrong answers. She walked 1 kilometer for 17 hours because the alternative was stopping. This is not athleticism. This is not training. This is something else. Something the galaxy has not seen before. The Commission recommends that future assessments of human potential be revised to account for this capacity. We further recommend that the human species be reclassified from unremarkable to unpredictable. Finally, we recommend that the Interstellar Unity Games establish a new category of recognition, the Vasquez Citation, awarded to athletes who demonstrate exceptional persistence in the face of overwhelming disadvantage. Elena Vasquez will receive the first such citation. She earned it. She stood. She did not fall. Elena read the report in her quarters on Xylos Station, 3 years after the games. She was not an athlete anymore. Her body had never fully recovered from the gauntlet. The damage to her hands, her legs, her lungs had been too severe. The doctors had told her she would never compete again, and she had believed them. But she was not sad about it. She had done what she came to do. She had stood in the circle. She had refused to fall. She had shown the galaxy something they had never seen before, something they could not measure, something they would never forget. She put down the report and looked out the window. The station's interior was the same as it had always been. Blue light, white walls, the constant hum of machinery. But it looked different to her now. Smaller, more familiar, almost like home. Her door chimed. "Come in," she said. "Tragsba antarat." He looked older than she remembered. His carapace had developed new cracks. His secondary eyelids moved more slowly. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, curious, always searching for understanding. "You read the report," he said. "I read it." And Elena shrugged. It was the same shrug she had given him on her first day on Xylos Station, when he had asked her to run the flexibility assessment again. The same casual, unconcerned, infuriatingly calm gesture. And nothing, she said. I did what I did. They wrote what they wrote. The galaxy keeps spinning. For XVA made a sound that might have been amusement. It was hard to tell was Xylanthic. The commission wants you to return to Paxis 7 for the citation ceremony, he said. They want to honor you. I know. Will you go? Elena thought about it. She thought about the golden light of the Twilight Zone, the roar of the crowd, the pain of the gauntlet, the endless hours of standing in the circle, refusing to fall. She thought about all of it, and then she shook her head. No, she said. Why not? She looked at Threxva. In the blue light of her quarters, her dark eyes seemed to hold the same thing they had always held. Patience. Endurance. The quiet, stubborn refusal to do anything other than what she had decided to do. Because I already won, she said. The ceremony is for them. The standing was for me. Frexva was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, his secondary eyelids contracting in what Elena had learned was his species' version of a smile. I understand, he said. Do you? No, he admitted. But I am learning. Elena smiled. It was the same smile she had given him in the medical bay after the stand. Small, barely there, but unmistakable. That's all anyone can do, she said. She stood in the circle while the galaxy fell around her. She did not move. She did not shift her position. She simply refused. And the galaxy, for the first time, paid attention.